All those in favor of the motion will please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed to the motion will please say nay.
Nay.
In my opinion, the nays have it.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be back here. My name is Stephen Blais. I'm the Member of Provincial Parliament for Orleans, and I'm joined this morning by Emily McIntosh and Farah Grosel from the Women of Ontario Say No, and with Nancy O'Brien, one of the brave women from the City of Ottawa who first came forward to discuss the situation in Ottawa and help highlight how prolific this is, unfortunately, across Ontario. And to all members of the Government Caucus, that I did not consider this to be a partisan issue, that if the government was prepared to introduce their own legislation that included the fundamentals of this kind of punishment, I would be not only supportive of that, I would be the biggest champion for that.
Certainly women, female councillors specifically, have stepped up hugely, which is not a surprise given that every woman that I know has actually experienced harassment in some form. Not to say that it's been exclusive. We've had a lot of support.
This is about future generations and what they will come to know as acceptable. All Bill 5 aims to do is address the gap in legislation whereby elected officials will be held accountable for substantiated egregious acts. This is no different than any other workplace in Ontario. It's hard to believe that this level of advocacy is required for something so fundamental. The government has the ability to expedite necessary laws, yet here we are.
We do not pay enough attention to the municipal government, and we should. The municipal level of government is in charge of your roads, garbage pickup, emergency services, snow removal, parks, development, and so many more services that impact your life on a daily basis. The jobs they do are important. In the private sector, I think it is fair to say that the leadership of a company sets the tone of the work environment for the whole company. Leadership can cultivate either a safe and inclusive work culture or a toxic one. I believe this to be true of leadership in our democracy as well. Our leadership sets the tone for the rest of our country, our province, as well as our cities and towns. If there is a work environment that enables toxic behavior, bullying, intimidation, and harassment without proper accountability, then it is very understandable why we see so much dysfunction in our governments. My former boss, a city councillor of over 20 years, used to encourage me to use bullying and intimidation tactics to achieve his goals. I mean, that's exactly what he used with his young female staff. He also sprinkled in some sexual harassment, exploitation, and trauma that I'm not going to get into. You can read the Integrity Commissioner reports for that. I will say, though, I am not the same person I was before my experience in that office. But this is just part of the current work culture in municipal politics. A survey conducted by the Ontario Municipal Administrators Association found that 77% of respondents reported harassment and bullying by elected officials, with 76% stating they had personally been at the receiving end of harassment by a member of council. And as a current City of Ottawa employee, let me tell you about my colleagues. They are brilliant, skilled, and passionate professionals who are devoted to the job that they do. They deserve a safe work environment free of harassment from their top bosses. There are so many specific examples of bullying and harassment of municipal staff across Ontario. A planner in Simcoe, a business innovation and entrepreneurship officer in Barrie, a city clerk in Northern Ontario, another city clerk, city manager, director of planning and building, director of parks and recreation in Sarnia. There's an entire 2022 report out of Brighton highlighting the bullying and harassment that Brighton staff have had to endure to put food on their tables. Here's the real injustice. In most of these cases, These incidents resulted in the victims of harassment either going on medical leave or resigning, and the abusers continued to enjoy their position of power with little recourse for their behavior. Let's not forget, the resulting lawsuits from these incidents of workplace harassment, intimidation, and bullying are all paid for by the taxpayers. Of course, this unprofessional and toxic behavior permeates through our city and town halls across Ontario as well, with the bullying and harassment happening between council members. Examples of this are in places like Ottawa, Mississauga, Kincardine, Oshawa, Sudbury, Richmond Hill, and many more. Councillors deserve to work in a professional and safe environment as well, which is why I believe Bill 5 has the support from over 150, I found out just now, councils across Ontario. It is bonkers, literally bonkers, that in 2023, our highest offices are allowed to comport themselves like high school bullies. This needs to change. I leave you with this. I am someone's daughter. I am someone's mother, someone's friend, someone's niece, someone's colleague. I am the love of someone's life. If I were any of those things to you, would you allow this injustice in the leadership of our municipalities to continue? Please support Bill 5, stopping harassment and abuse by local leaders today. Thank you. Hi. I look like hell? Exactly the way I feel right now. Feel like hell. Hi, I'm Nancy O'Brien, and myself and many women have been working hard to try and get the Ontario Municipal Act changed to address this huge gap in legislation around workplace safety. I'm not going to get into it all here. If you're interested, I'll either link it below or I'll put it up in a card up here. I did another video where I kind of went through the whole history of all of the effort that we've been doing since 2020 to get the Ontario Municipal Act changed. So yesterday was a big day. The Women of Ontario Say No, which are a organic group that was born out of Barrie, who have been doing incredible work across Ontario. They've networked across Ontario. So leading up to the debate, people traveled from across Ontario that had heard about the Ontario Women Say No, the Women of Ontario Say No, that they'd heard about the Women of Ontario Say No. And Stephen Blais, who it was his private member's bill, he held a reception for us, which was very kind. And it was an incredible opportunity. I was able to personally thank some of the women and men that have completed deputations at councils across Ontario. And to anyone that I didn't get to, thank you. Genuinely thank you for taking the time. And that's an intimidating experience to go and speak at a council table, and I really appreciate you for doing that. I had originally hoped to sign up to do some, but I had to think about my mental health, and the idea of going back into that world, that political world, I think would have eroded my wellness. So I've been trying to support in the ways that I can. I did provide a video that could be played I know that's not as impactful as like actually sitting there. But you know, it's draining. It's tough doing that. During the debate, myself and another one of the survivors of Rick Shirelli, and she was one of the complainants in one of the Integrity Commissioner reports that came out of Ottawa. Her and I were sitting in the lower gallery area during the debate, and it was incredibly emotional. It was very hard for me to keep it together, especially after I heard what the government had to say about the bill. The twist, I guess, that occurred was particularly insulting, and it was a hard blow. Charmaine Williams was the one that spoke to the bill from the government, from the Conservative side. And I'm just gonna roll some of the highlights.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is my pleasure to rise today and speak to Bill 5, the Stopping Harassment and Abuse by Local Leaders Act 2022. But if you do something wrong and you're accused of harassment and charges are laid, we have a judicial system to get involved, to do its work, because in Ontario, you are innocent until proven guilty. This bill wants to make integrity commissioners more powerful than an appointed judge. And if you're accused of something illegal, you get a trial. But this bill wants to replace that. And this bill wants to allow the Integrity Commissioner to remove an elected official without a trial. This bill also wants to give Integrity Commissioners more power, the power to remove publicly elected officials. That's a very strong power. Even voters cannot do that until an election has happened. So the bill wants to make the Integrity Commissioner stronger than a judge and stronger than voters. And that is democratically wrong. With that much power, this bill put forward by the member could actually increase the amount of damaging allegations and harassment and abuse that takes place in a town or city in hopes of seeing the removal of a member of council, male or female. The Office of the Integrity Commissioner are established to address serious issues like fraud and corruption. However, a number of municipalities have expressed concerns about the potential misuse for political purposes. Even without the authority to remove elected officials from office, the Integrity Commissioner can already have a negative impact on the reputation of councillors and their ability to serve residents and the city. And also keep in mind, there are very few qualifications for an Integrity Commissioner, and there's no requirement for an Integrity Commissioner to be a lawyer. The majority of council can appoint a biased person and use them to constantly attack the minority of council, imposing the harshest penalties for the minor infractions, while at the same time receiving or taking no actions against their friends on council, even for serious infractions. And there are no appeal mechanisms other than the courts, which is very cost prohibitive, especially for smaller municipalities where councillor salaries are low. Defending against repeated nuisance complaints can place a significant financial burden on elected officials. Additionally, the discretion to choose which complaints to investigate gives the Integrity Commissioner significant influence. Given these considerations, I strongly advise against expanding the powers of the Integrity Commissioner at this time. Speaker, I want to see more women at the table, at the council table, and I want to make sure that the policies and the legislation that comes forward by us as the government support women in retaining their space as well. And I'm concerned that a bill like this is essentially throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And we can't afford to do that at a time when we need to see those who have different opinions and different experiences to share elected to office. These issues are best handled at a local level, and ultimately elected members of council must face the consequences of their actions and decisions at the ballot box.
So it was incredibly disheartening, manipulative, in my opinion, to hear her say that a bill to address workplace harassment was going to hurt women. It just doesn't make any sense. It was frankly, it was insulting. Honestly, it was insulting. The way that the fear-mongering around the idea of this bill being politicized and this blatant lie that somehow this would give the integrity, if she actually read the bill. So I don't know if she just didn't read the bill or she blatantly lied. Either way, both scenarios are not acceptable, really, for a sitting member of provincial parliament and somebody that's supposed to be apparently focused on prioritizing women's issues. Bill 5 doesn't give the integrity commissioners any more power than they currently have. They still would just have the power to decide whether to investigate a claim, or, you know, if the integrity commissioner thinks that the claim is frivolous, then they don't have to investigate it. They don't have to look into it. If they do decide to investigate it, then they can come up with some recommendations, write a report with the findings of their investigation, and in cases of severe misconduct, they can apply to the courts to have a councillor or mayor removed, and then through a judicial review, that's how they would how they would lose their seat between elections. But at least it would enable there to be some way. And she also said something about that I really couldn't wrap my head around, about this integrity commissioner, giving the integrity commissioner all of this power would not give councillors or mayors an opportunity to a fair trial. And I just, in what workplace do harassment and abuse and complaints of abuse, do they have to go through a trial? Like, usually there's an internal investigation, and then after that investigation, if it finds that whoever complained, whoever made those allegations, if they were correct, then they get fired. Like, they don't call the police and have the police investigate these claims of harassment. And even so, like, the way that the current Ontario Municipal Act is written, somebody who assaults, whatever way that is, say a member of their staff, a municipal staff member, a member of the public, one of their colleagues, if they get charged, which, okay, innocent until proven guilty, but then if they are convicted, if they are not sentenced to jail time, then they still get to keep their seat. That you have to actually be behind bars to lose your position of power, your position that comes with a lot of privilege and influence. You have to be in actual jail to lose your position of power. The only time that, like, a conviction can get you turfed is when it comes to, like, certain things around the Conflict of Interest Act. But for misconduct, you have to be in jail. And if you look at the statistics, I mean, 80% of, when it comes to women's and being SA'd, like 80% don't even, like, police don't even hear about it. And then of the 20%, 1 in 10, and this is according to Statistics Canada. I'll link the report in below, but 1 in 10 actually lead to conviction of those 20% that actually go to police. Of that 1 in 10, 7% of those end up being sentenced to jail. Like, it's only in the most violent and heinous situations of SA that somebody is actually placed in jail for that. The way that, like, getting into the judicial system is just like a whole other can of worms. But hearing Charmaine say that was shocking. Was quite frankly shocking that she's talking about when it comes to workplace, like, because this is their workplace, right? People that are elected, like, that is their job. Being a politician, being a councillor, being a mayor, that is their job. Maybe not in some of the smaller municipalities. In the smaller municipalities, it is a part-time thing. But in our upper tier municipalities in Ontario, it's definitely, that is their job. And it is wild to me that we, the public, who, like, we're the ones through our tax dollars, we're the ones that are paying their salaries. So we're kind of like, they're our employees, right? We've hired them to represent us through our democratic process. So it's, this is the only case where you are, like, locked into a 4-year contract, like, locked in. It is solid, it's tight. Like, you are locked in for 4 years, and there are very minimal ways to fire your employee of the people. Very little. And I believe that needs to change. I believe that we deserve better. The public deserves better from our elected representatives. The particularly difficult part about all of this was that Charmaine knows this because she talked about it when she was a city councillor in Brampton, and this is what she had to say about it at the time. I'm gonna roll the clip.
I want Mr. Dillon to resign because I believe he no longer has the confidence of the residents of Brampton. Resign. I think that Mr. Dillon should resign because the taxpayers of Brampton put their faith in me and all of us to make hard decisions based on the facts as they are presented to us by our professional staff. Resign. I want Mr. Dillon to resign because we live in a society where women have for far too long been the subject of assault and mistreatment, and women are fed up and are not going to take it anymore. Resign. Mr. Dillon should resign because the woman referred to in the Integrity Commissioner report is not a complainant. She is a victim. Resign. I want you to resign because we as a council cannot sit in chambers and make decisions about the future of all Bramptonians and accept your comments in good faith, knowing what we know from reading the transcript of that reporting. Resign. I want you to resign because we can no longer trust you to meet with any of our female staff members without worrying that they should be accompanied by security. Resign. I want you to resign because your actions as outlined in the Integrity Commissioner's report have put the city of Brampton at risk of major lawsuits. Resign. I want you to resign because it would be the honorable thing to do after such a dishonorable display of misogyny. Resign. I believe you should resign because the residents of Wards 9 and 10 deserve to have full representation from someone they can trust and feel safe with to meet. Resign. I want you to resign because your victim gave you 74 chances to stop what you were doing by saying no 74 times when it should have just taken one. Resign. I want you to resign because as the chair of the city's Economic Development Committee, you have put in jeopardy the economic well-being of our city. Resign. I believe you should resign because your actions have brought a stain on the reputation of the office of councillor. Resign. I think you should resign because you have abused the privilege that was bestowed on you to make decisions that shape the future of the community that we call home. Resign. I want you to resign because every little girl growing up in Brampton deserves to have a city council that is free of sexism and misogyny. Resign. I want you to resign because every little boy growing up in Brampton needs to learn about consent, and that no means no, and that seeking or getting consent not seeking or getting consent has consequences. Resign. I believe you should resign because we as a council do not have the right to remove you from office. Resign. I want you to resign because I'm afraid that there may be other victims out in the community. Resign. I want you to resign because your departure from council chambers will help the victim to understand that we have zero tolerance for the type of actions that you are alleged to have done. Resign. I want you to resign because Brampton will be looked on with scorn and contempt if you continue coming to council chambers as if nothing happened. Resign. I want you to resign because your continued denials mean that you have no remorse for your actions, even though there's a recording of what you did. Resign. I want you to resign because in Canada, over 80% of sexual assaults go unreported to the police. Resign. I want you to resign because statistics show over 40% of assailants are known to the victims of sexual assault. Resign. I believe you should resign because this city council endorses a zero tolerance policy for harassment and workplace bullying. Resign. Mr. Dillon, you should resign because this investigation and the Integrity Commissioner report has become a distraction from the important work of city building. Resign. I believe you should resign because I should not have to ask our senior staff to contact all of your current former staff to find out if they've ever been one of your victims. Resign. I believe you should resign because your actions as outlined in the Integrity Commissioner's report will cost taxpayers hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. Resign. I believe you should resign because everyone listening to my voice right now knows someone who has been a victim of sexual assault. Resign. I believe you should resign because I have 3 little girls at home, and I want them to know that their mother is going to fight to make sure they grow up in a society that is better than the one that I grew up in. Resign.
If I had a time machine, I would go back in time to retrieve that Charmaine and bring her into the Ontario legislature before she was influenced by party politics. It's hard to watch a woman sell out and betray fellow women, sell her soul, in my opinion, to party politics. I don't know. I'm not in her head, but clearly, based on what she said before and what she said now, and the way that she tried to say that a bill that would put in more accountability for workplace abuse and harassment would actually hurt women. I mean, maybe she feels that way, but I don't know how. Like, what we're talking about in a lot of cases, it involves men and the way that they're treating women.
I'm asking you to resign because according to Statistics Canada, 3 in 10 women were targeted by inappropriate sexual behavior in a work-related setting compared to only 17% of men. Resign.
I don't know if she believed what she was saying. Like, during her speech, I'm gonna roll that particular piece of the clip right now.
Now, I appreciate the essence of the bill. However, I'm concerned with the consequences that will occur if this bill was to go forward. You know, this bill might drop the guard that is in place with our Municipal Act. So much so that women who are elected to council tables are at risk of losing their spot if they speak out against their council colleagues. And the women who are at the table, who are part of making those decisions, they face a lot of pushback. I know myself as a councillor faced a lot of pushback. And I strongly feel that if the powers were there to remove a councillor, I might not have been elected because of the amount of pushback I received as a councillor, just for going to the beat of my own drum and speaking out and you know, so serving the residents in the best way that I felt was necessary. And it was effective because I had a lot of support. And that allowed me to be here now, today, provincially, to serve.
I don't know if she actually believes that based on what she had said previously, or maybe she's just, I don't know, maybe, you know, people change, but it's very, I'm trying to understand this logic of something being put in place for stronger accountability, how that, like, really to address harassment and abuse of women in the workplace, how that could be used as a weapon against women that are elected officials. And then going into this whole thing about trying to attract more women into politics when creating a safe environment for them is going to attract them into politics instead of towing the line of the status quo, because women that are working in politics are already experiencing a lot of abuse and misogyny from the public. They shouldn't have to be dealing with that from their colleagues as well. And you know, it also goes against so many female councillors that have actually brought motions forward to support Bill 5. Like, why is it that all of these women that are working in municipal politics today are supporting this proposed legislation, but she's saying that it's going to hurt them? But and I mean, if Charmaine can look at herself in the mirror every day and be okay with herself, then I guess that's what matters. She couldn't look at me. You'd think that if you believed everything that you were saying, you would be able to look at the survivors that were sitting there and demanding the change. So Bill 5 is officially dead, and now we have to regroup and come up with some new strategies, because this issue isn't going away. I mean, municipalities are asking for this change. So I'm going to continue advocating for changes to the Ontario Municipal Act. And I want to thank Stephen Blais and his colleagues that stood up and supported Bill 5. There were many great, wonderful things said. And I'm going to roll that right now.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It's an honour to be here tonight, and I rise to speak once again to my private member's bill, Bill 5, Stopping Harassment and Abuse by Local Leaders Act 2022. Now, Madam Speaker, this is the second time we're debating this bill in the legislature. I was enthused, if not ecstatic, last year when it received the unanimous support of the legislature, unanimous support from both the opposition and from the government, Madam Speaker. Many men, I would say most men, never really have to think about that. And while the abuse of this authority, no matter what form it takes, is not limited to victimizing women, it is women who are the overwhelming victims of it. The harassment and abuse of women is a plague, Madam Speaker. It's a plague that infects almost every aspect of our society. And tragically, as we have witnessed over the last number of years, the halls of power in cities right across the province are not immune to this plague. In fact, in many ways, our institutions of democracy are ill-equipped to handle it. Now, there are many reasons for this, Madam Speaker, but one of the most important reasons is the absence of the most severe professional consequences. Consequences that any employee in any organization in Ontario, and I would say across Canada, would almost certainly face. And that's termination.
I want to start by thanking the member from Orleans for bringing this bill forward again. I hope that the same result is achieved today. I also, it was a pleasure to meet Stephanie and Nancy, who are here. Congratulations for coming to Queen's Park. It's very brave to stand up. I don't have time to get into all of the details of things I disagree with the Associate Minister with in some of her comments, respectfully. But it would be remiss if I didn't say that we were involved in a consultation with the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing over a year ago, and there's been over a year for the government to do something after having consulted. And I was on a phone call with the member from Orleans and the leader of the Green Party, and we had a full consultation and nothing ever happened. So I'm glad that the member has brought something forward, and we have a chance today to make something happen. We're strongly in favour of efforts to strengthen workplace violence and harassment policies, especially when it comes to councillors, local leaders, and those in positions of power. As the official opposition critic for municipal affairs, this is something my team and I have been following very closely. We've seen time and again in this province councillors get away with absolutely disgusting and egregious behaviour from Ottawa, West Lincoln, Mississauga, Brampton, and the list goes on and on. When councillors who commit such acts are not held to account, it denies justice for those who have been harassed and creates an environment that prevents others from coming forward. It shows that local leaders get to operate by a different set of rules when they should be held to a much higher standard. As pointed out by the advocacy group, the Women of Ontario Say No, a fundamental underlying principle of broadening diversity, equity, and inclusion in politics rests on the assumption that a workplace is safe. This is currently not the case. When councillors who have perpetrated harassment to staff or fellow councillors can retain their position, no matter how serious, it creates and protects toxic workplaces, which in turn has an adverse effect on mental health in the workplace and throughout the community. Speaker, having this new accountability ensures those responsible for terrible acts are held to account, and that the rest of Council will be able to continue their duties in serving the public.
To offer my total support for the Stopping Harassment and Abuse by Local Leaders Act, also known as Bill 5, and I want to thank the member for Orleans for bringing that forward. However, I'm a little bit disappointed after I've heard the Associate Minister deliver remarks. This proposed legislation is an important proposed change to address the important issue of workplace harassment and violence, specifically within our municipal councils. I don't understand the arguments of the Associate Minister of Women, Social and Economic Opportunity to not support this bill. She said that the bill would be giving too much power to the Commissioner of Integrity, yet the government is moving exactly in that direction for school trustee in Bill 98. I simply don't understand that the Associate Minister is asking for the status quo when so much harm has been done to women already. I don't understand why the government is clearly not supporting this proposed legislation when so many municipalities have clearly expressed their support.
This legislation is actually, to me, it's a very simple extension of accountability. We all know as elected officials we have a code of conduct that we must adhere to, and in municipalities, many of them, by option, may have hired and brought in an integrity commissioner. Certainly by the City of Toronto, through our Act, we have to have one. It's actually not optional. That there is no real accountability. And yet at the same time, we know that elected officials should be held to, I believe, a higher account. People expect that for us to hold public office. In the City of Toronto, I regret to share, but I feel very compelled that I must share, that we have some examples here as well. It's our shame to carry, and despite the fact that we tried to deal with it, the existing legislation just wasn't simply strong enough. The former mayor from 2010 to 2014 from Etobicoke North has been known to abuse staff, frighten staff, drive drunk, and speeding. On multiple instances, he has been seen in various states of drunkenness. His staff were subjected to verbal abuse, and there were reports of also physical abuse where he had threatened his male staff. He had also extended inappropriate behavior to a female staff, also while inebriated. He also threatened to kill someone, which was caught on video. He was asked by City Council to take a leave of absence, but then he also refused. Essentially, there was no legal mechanism to remove this mayor from office, which he clearly was unfit to hold that office. Currently, we have another city councillor, a member from Scarborough Centre, who's been charged with 2 counts of sexual assault in the summer of 2022, and currently his case is before the courts. He's been asked to step down as a deputy mayor, and that he was the chair of various city standing committees. He was re-elected and allowed to serve as council with no other repercussions. If he were to be convicted without jail time, this individual can continue to serve as city councillor and stand for re-election. That simply is not right. For a number of reasons that we don't have the time to get into, Minister of Women's Social and Economic Opportunity, that perhaps this could be an abuse of power. I would say that it would be an abuse of power to not pass this legislation. It would be a message very clearly sent to municipalities across Ontario that this government is not willing to hold abusive behaviour, harassment in the workplace, those individuals to account, and yet we know that is required, absolutely required. Finally, I want to be able to offer this. External third-party reviews and breach of investigation provisions are oftentimes what is needed in order for an integrity commissioner to go ahead, and sometimes they have to go through the Occupational Health and Safety Act or the Ontario Human Rights Code. Any suggestion that an integrity commissioner is not qualified to do their job is simply not true. I know the integrity commissioners at the City of Toronto have done an exceptional job. I've worked with 2 of them, and I can hold their record to anyone else's in Ontario when it comes to accountability offices. They should be empowered to do this work, and they should be doing it in the partnership with judges when necessary. Thank you.
To speak in support of the Stopping Harassment and Abuse by Local Leaders Act, I want to thank the member for Leon for bringing this forward. This is an important step in ensuring a harassment-free workplace for local governments. Every Ontarian should feel safe in their workplace, especially when they're serving their communities. Lack of accountability sends a poor message to the public when staff are mistreated, harassed, and abused, and there are no penalties or repercussions for perpetrators. Elected officials should be held to a higher standard, not a lower standard, Speaker. And that's exactly what this bill does, and it's exactly why the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, the Rural Ontario Municipal Association, Ontario's big city mayors, and so many other municipalities are saying to us as MPPs, stand up, take action, show leadership, and ensure that we have a harassment-free workplace in local government. So I was disappointed to hear members opposite question the integrity of the Integrity Commissioner's ability to enforce this at the local level. Speaker, I think women in Ontario are demanding and expecting more of us. And that's exactly why I want to quote Women in Ontario Say No to finish my remarks. When municipally elected officials can retain their position of power, even when egregious acts of harassment are investigated and substantiated, we all lose. The message this sends to communities and the residents in them is toxic. Speaker, we deserve better in Ontario. Women deserve better in Ontario.
From the bottom of my heart, Nancy O'Brien, Stephanie Dobbs, Victoria Labour, who's not with us today, these are the three folks, Speaker, that stood up to Rick Chiarelli. They're the reason this bill's on the floor. But I also want to acknowledge something, Speaker, in the time that I have left, to truly try to persuade the government, and the Associate Minister in particular, to let this bill go to committee, to fix what you don't like, so we come away with something that will be a tool that we can build to ensure safety in political offices. What I heard the member from Niagara Centre and the member from Toronto Centre, the member from Orléans, the member for Ottawa-Vanier say very clearly is that right now it is not an appropriate response to say, let's wait until the next election. Because somewhere right now, in this province, in this country, somebody is being harassed in the workplace by someone with a position of power, by someone utilizing that position of power to implement harm on that staff person. And I want to believe that regardless of the political party we come from, we see it as our obligation to make sure that that never, ever happens.
This bill passed unanimously a year ago. Dozens of complaints have come forward. I feel for you. Sometimes you get sent to do something that you know is not right. And the right thing to do is to vote in support of this bill. And I want all of you to think about that, because it is. You supported it unanimously a year ago, and you should be doing it again now. What's the reason you're not?
Madam Speaker, I also would like to correct the assertion that the Associate Minister made. This bill gives absolutely no power to the Integrity Commissioner to remove someone from office. This bill gives absolutely no power to City Council to remove someone from office. After this bill, the Integrity Commissioner in municipalities will have exactly the same power he or she has today, which is the ability to investigate harassment. What the bill does is create a judicial process, which is what the Minister spoke about. The bill creates a judicial process where a judge, based on the investigation that will already happen, a judge can make the decision to remove a city councillor from office. This is the same process that exists today for conflicts of interest. Today in Ontario, if you spend $1 more as a city councillor or mayor on your victory party, not on advertising, not on anything to gain votes, if you spend $1 more on your victory party, the automatic punishment, without judicial review, the automatic punishment is vacating your office if you spend $1 more on your victory party. So what you're telling people is that if you spend an extra dollar on a beer to a volunteer after you've already won, that's worthy of removing yourself from office. But if you ask your employees to come to work without a bra, if you ask them to perform oral sex in exchange for money, if you harass and abuse them for years, there is absolutely no consequence other than a slap on the wrist.
Thank you.
So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you for protecting the rights of women and protecting the rights of municipal employees, of political employees. I appreciate you. And please stay tuned. I am going to keep on fighting until the change happens, because I can't allow what happened to me to continue to happen to women in this province by our most powerful people. We deserve better. I deserve better.